Good afternoon or good morning, depends on what time zones you're in. My name is Sanjay Puri. I'm here hosting a very important show on the presidential transition process. We've had an election, an incredible election, where we have President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, who is going to be taking office in January. But before that, there is a whole process of transition of power from one president to another, which is a process that happens in our country. We have some incredible guests today who are going to talk to us about how this process can move, how all of you can participate in that. We have Shekar Narasimhan with us, and he obviously has played a key role in this process. He's the founder of the RP Victory Fund, which has played a tremendous role with endorsing President-elect Biden, and also played a tremendous role in turning Virginia blue. And we are lucky to have Shekar with us. We also have Arunan with us, Arunan Arulampalam. He's the Deputy Commissioner at the State of Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection and also a delegate to the 2020 Democratic National Convention. Thank you for being with us. We have Amit Jani, who a lot of people know, who's been the National Asian American and Pacific Islander Director for the Biden-Harris campaign, who's, I'm sure, if you're been active in politics, you received an email from Amit, and if you haven't, that means either your spam filter is up or you're not active in politics. But he's also been very active in a senior role with Governor Phil Murphy as well as Senator Bob Menendez. Thanks, Amit, for being with us. And we have Robinder Sachdev, who's the president of Image India Institute. I think we're missing Satish, but hopefully Satish Korpe, who's the founder of Indian Americans for Biden-Harris, and he was also a congressional candidate for the Virginia 8th District. Hopefully he will join us today. Firstly, congratulations to all of you. All of you have played a tremendous role in your capacity for this election, which, everybody says it's the biggest election in my lifetime, but we would have to say that this was a very, very important election. I don't believe in hyperboles, but it was an important election. And I know I'm on the Facebook of a couple of you, and I know how passionate some of you were about this election. So really congratulations, because people forget how hard work it takes. I was just talking to Shekar off, backstage, and he was saying it's taken 6 hours a day out of his time now that he can at least get that time back. So congratulations. We have an Indian American community which is really energized. We have an Indian American community which is tremendous in terms of background and professionals, etc. And they are very curious to hear from some of you as to how the transition process is going to play and what kind of role can they play in this. So Shekar, if I may start with you, and then Amit, and then Arunam, if you can just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So thank you, Sanjay, and nice to meet old friends again. Yes, a very hard-fought election at a very difficult and complex time in American history with the pandemic and all the changes that are going on. So we're glad that it is almost over. And that we are now in the phase of what is typically, as Sanjay called, a very orderly transition. This is not a particularly orderly transition, as many of you know, because we have not had a concession and the approval of what is called ascertainment, which is where the General Services Administration ascertains there is a winner. Typically happens when all the major networks declare that there is a winner in electoral votes. And then $8 million roughly flows into the other side so that the Biden team in this case can get organized, staffed, gets office space, and starts working with the agencies on transition. What the Biden team has done, because they had little choice, was start in July with a very small staff, build it out now with what are called landing teams. People who are disciplined, focused people that say somebody who's in healthcare, for example, in HHS. So they have roughly 20 people or so in each team that they have appointed. That information is public. There are lots of Asian Americans and Indian Americans on that list of experts in their focus fields. And these are people that are known and academics and people who worked in the campaign, but their job is understand the agency, what are the issues that are facing them immediately, what will a new secretary in a department have to face day one, what are the actions that you should take between days 1 and 100, executive actions, administrative actions, etc. So those landing teams are in place. They are now working actively. And at the same time, Sanjay, before and I'll stop, is this whole process of appointments. 4,000 roughly in what is called the plum book of people, but basically the focus in the first 2 weeks to 4 weeks, next 2 to 4 weeks, is the US cabinet, the top positions in the White House, and major sub-cabinet level jobs. And that process is now very much underway and rolling forward.
Thanks. That's great to hear. Amit, President-elect Biden and Kamala Harris, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, have promised the most diverse cabinet ever in the history of the United States. That will probably also involve a lot of good people. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that some of the people on this show will be part of that whole process and being in the administration. So, Amit, can you, Shekar has outlined some of the things that are there. Would you want to add something to that?
Sure, absolutely. And Sanjay, first off, thank you for having me on, and to the USINPAC. Really appreciate being here. And I also just want to thank the community generally. I think as Shekar and others can attest, obviously I dealt with the general Asian American Pacific Islander community, but particularly the South Asian and Indian American community. We just saw so much excitement, so much involvement. It's really unprecedented. People like my parents who, my mom traditionally hasn't got involved this time, and so many others across the country. And I'm happy to kind of go into some of that substance, but it's really been an unprecedented showing of support, of turnout, and especially with now Vice President-elect Kamala Devi Harris's election. I think there's just so much more involvement this past cycle. So just want to thank the community as well. I think Shekar is completely right. I mean, it's certainly not the most straightforward transition process at the moment, as everyone is seeing it unfold with the Trump administration and the politics that they're playing. Certainly, that's hurting all of us across the country, whether it's COVID and vaccine distribution or the economy or just so many other important issues. It's really hindering the transition team's efforts to really talk to the current experts and those involved. But, again, like you mentioned, Sanjay, President-elect Biden now has promised, even during the campaign, throughout the campaign, that the transition team, the campaign itself, and his administration is going to really reflect the diversity of this country, including that of the South Asian and Indian American community. And you're already seeing that. You saw that on the campaign. Obviously, I was a national AAPI director, but you had so many Indians and South Asians across the board on the campaign, whether it was our chief operating officer, Maju Verghese, our CFO, Saloni Multani, our digital chief of staff, and the list just goes on and on across the country, not just at the national level, but, also in the states, on the local level, and across the board. And you're continuing to see that with the transition team now. You see former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who's appointed as a co-chair of the COVID task force, which is going to play an outsized role in this transition. You see it across the board. Seema Nanda's on there, and so many others. So I think you'll see that. And then going into the administration, I think it's going to be very diverse. And certainly I know the community is pushing for that diversity within the South Asian and Indian realm. But generally, the President-elect Biden now certainly promised that. And that's a promise, I'm sure he's going to keep. So
thanks so much, Amit. Arunan, you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I'll just, well, first of all, thank you, Sanjay, for having me on this panel, and Shekar and Amit. It's nice to meet both of you. I think Shekar and Amit clearly have such a huge involvement in this Biden campaign, and I can't speak to the sort of inside politics of that transition team, and they did beautifully. And I'm so happy that there are people in our community who are representing us in that capacity, because that's really a new thing in America, to have this level of involvement from our community in a presidential campaign of that magnitude. So I'm really proud to see that. From where I sit, I think the biggest thing that I will be focused on between now and January is making calls into the state of Georgia. The biggest thing, we've seen what happens when we elect a great president in Obama with a Senate that is just obstinate and out to stop any sort of progress. And we can't continue to backtrack. We can't continue to stall. And it's so important that we get Ralph Warnock and John Ossoff elected in Georgia. And there are a lot of great South Asians there on the ground who are standing up efforts in the state of Georgia. And so whether it's through a AAPI-based call list or just generally, I would encourage you, if you have free time, this is what I'm doing. I'll tell you, Amit, much like you, my mother, I've always been pretty involved in politics. My parents have always cared about politics. My mother made her first calls to likely voters this cycle around, because it was such an important election. And I hope that that'll continue with members of our community. If we can flip those two seats and flip the Senate, I think we're going to see a much different next 2 years and hopefully 4 years than if we have Mitch McConnell standing in the way of any sort of progress.
Well, thanks so much, Arunan. I don't know if Satish is back or Robinder is here, but if they're not, so Amit, since you are time constrained, we have started getting a lot of resumes, as you have rightly pointed out, and Shekar has pointed out. There are policy teams. There's the BidenTransition.org, the policy teams, the landing teams are there. We have, and this is without any outreach, we got over several hundred people, and there's, as you know, our community has some very, very capable people. I'm looking at the screen, I see three just exceptional people who do tremendous work in this administration. And the reason I say this is, there is a lot of work that is going to be needed, Amit, because when you look at agencies, like you look at State Department and others, there are some real gaping holes that exist. And we have challenges in HHS because of what is the priority is COVID, you have jobs and all those other things. And we have a lot of talent that exists. We have a housing expert here sitting in Shekar himself. So when we talk to the Indian American community, obviously the setting expectations is also very, very important, because a lot of them want to give back, because most people realize that going into this government is going to involve, in many cases, a pay cut, but they want to, because you said it's an important election. Is there a message that we can convey? Is there a process that's in place now? We are having conversations, but is there something you can tell us, or something to our audience that would be helpful to them, Amit?
Sure, absolutely. And I know the transition team, like we mentioned earlier, we want it to be as diverse as possible. As Shekar mentioned, the transition team has outlined the review policy teams that are currently in place. So the first thing I would encourage folks that want to get involved and support the transition team or the administration is to visit the transition website, which is buildbackbetter.com. And so if you go on that, there's also a forum. So I know a lot of people have also reached out to us and our team about joining the administration as well. So for those that are interested in either the transition or administration, that would be the first step, is going to buildbackbetter.com, completing that interest form. And that way you can outline, your specialties, your issue areas that you're interested in, and, those agencies or offices that may align with your background. So that would be the first step, just getting, filling that interest form out, getting sure you're getting, your interest conveyed, and, adding your background there. I think following that, I would also encourage folks that want to help out with the transition team, specifically with the policy working groups that we have for transition. That's also outlined on the website. So if you take a look at that, you'll see whether it's housing or the economy, COVID, healthcare, all across the board. There's a list of people, 10 to 15 folks who are really leading those efforts in those fields. So I would take a look at that, make a effort to reach out to some of them, express your interest personally to them as well. Again, I think we have Indian Americans leading or as a part of those teams for each team no matter the issue area. So there's always someone, that you can liaison with. I know you mentioned Sanjay, Foreign Affairs. That's going to be incredibly important this time around. So we have Sumona Guha, who's on that. Anand Parekh and many others throughout the process. So that's something I would really encourage folks to do, is just go to buildbackbetter.com. One, express your interest by filling out the form, and then two, start reaching out to some of those folks that are already on there. And if I could be helpful, I'm certainly happy to do that and work with you, Sanjay, on connecting folks as well.
That'll be fantastic. Amit, just as a follow-on, are there priority areas for this administration that they are focused on for our audience to know?
Absolutely. So, of course, the first thing is getting, this COVID situation and the healthcare under control. So that's going to be, it's going to play an outsized role. They're already involved. Like I mentioned, former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy is helping to lead that. The economy, once we kind of get the COVID, pandemic under control, I think the economy is going to be hugely important. I think right now numbers are going down. I think, you're potentially looking at a recession when President-elect Biden comes into office. So that's going to also be a very important issue there. Then there's other issues like climate change, certainly that we're seeing globally, including in India, here in the United States, across the world. So that's certainly going to be a priority for the administration. As well as racial equity. That's something he's made a priority during the campaign. If you go to the website, joebiden.com, you'll see so many of the policy platforms and plans really outline racial equity, and especially with what we've been seeing, in the past year and even preceding that, that's certainly going to be a priority across all the departments, whether you're talking about, small business, tourism, social justice, across the board. So certainly those four issues are going to probably be the most important, initially and throughout the administration coming in.
Well, that's great, folks. So you heard Amit clearly outline that the COVID, the economy, racial justice, and climate change. So if any of you have that background, and he's also outlined the website and has offered to be help, and I think that's very, very important. Robinder, you have come in. Would you want to add some comments in there before I go to Steve, who's joined us, and then Shekar? We have a lot of conversation, and obviously Amit has to leave at 12:30. Robinder?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sanjay. A brilliant panel going. And what I would actually urge any listeners, viewers who are watching by this Facebook Live, which is on the USINPAC Political Action Committee Facebook page, please do wave by, check by, put in your questions. We've got fantastic minds here, really brainstorming and sharing their insights. So that would be my one message to our listeners and viewers. Please give in your questions. I saw Vikram Chauhan gave a very interesting question. Some of these could be provocative, but hey, we are open. It's a discussion, and it's an open-ended discussion. So that being said, I'll just ask one leading question and leave it with you, Sanjay, because you're the moderator. My question would be that innovation in, let's say, governance. Right now, let's say there is a transition, team being put in place, and then there will be the administrative positions. What I would like to know is that, is there a possibility, or how does it happen that once the transition is over, where does the transition team go? Sure, some of them maybe themselves end up in the administration, right? Fair enough. But other than that, you have, the new administration folks who've been appointed. This whole talent, this whole, brain trust, which is in the transition team, which is out there, and let's say especially the Indian American community folks who are in this whole, pool of talent, can we somehow look at innovating something, if not on an ongoing basis, but a loose conversation with these, because these were folks who kind of really been there. So that would be my one question I would leave for each panelist. Sanjay, over to you, sir, please.
Thanks, Robinder. And I'll make sure we carry that question forward for you. And I know Vic has asked a question. He's plugging for a candidate to be in the administration. So I'll try to ask that question. But before that, let me also get Steve, who has joined us. Steve, who's been one of the first elected officials in the state of North Carolina. Steve, our discussion is really about the transition. We have some people who have been working very, very hard. Amit Jani, who as I said, I'm sure you are on his email list. If you're not, then something is wrong with you, Steve. And then Shekar, obviously, who's played a tremendous role with API, as a founder of API, and Arunan. So, Steve, any comments for you for the transition?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's an honor being on with Shekar, such a great leader across this country. Shekar, great to see you again. And also Amit Jani, who, yes, I get more than his email. I bugged him a lot on his cell phone and worked with him here with Senator Choudhury and others to do what we can to turn North Carolina blue. We didn't do that, but we are so glad we got Joe Biden elected president. So thank you both for being here. And I guess my comment is, I think Amit did a great job summing up I think foreign affairs, economy, healthcare, all really, really big, important issues for this 46th president, Joe Biden, going in, having to deal with the pandemic. How does he make our economy stronger? My insight in terms of innovation, and I think Robinder, that's a great point. I think it's so critically important for the president to surround himself with people from the innovation community. So we can look at, for example, technology. I would like to see a very strong chief technology officer, one who comes from the tech industry and emerging areas of artificial intelligence and many of the new jobs of the new economy, which my family friend John Chambers, he is a Republican, but he's actually advising Prime Minister Modi. He's a Padma Shri winner. I had him on my radio show a couple weeks ago. And, John's advising Modi on startup formation and, how we leverage technology. He's advising Macron and France. I would like to see President Biden make a task force comprised of leaders like him and Bill Gates and others who aren't necessarily only dealing with the pandemic, but how do we accelerate job growth? How do we accelerate technology and data and analytics in the midst of a pandemic? So when you said innovation, that really triggered my mind. But I think we have so many people in our country that could serve in such great capacities in all of these different areas. So Sanjay, that's my thought. And I look forward to being here to help Shekar and Amit and you and also an old friend of mine, Steve Ricchetti. I want to give him a shout out and congratulate him for getting, he's going to have an office near the Oval Office. And I had the chance of meeting him for lunch about 2013 with my family in Washington. And just such a great man. And I grew up in Delaware for part of my life. So part of me feels proud. I know that the people in the White House will know what a real cheesesteak is like in Philadelphia, in Wilmington. But yeah.
Wonderful. I'll come to Amit about the innovation, but let me turn to Shekar. Shekar, we generally hear about the names. People are talking about Indra Nooyi, Vivek Murthy. We know is going to have an outsized role in there. There are other names like Sonal and others that you had on your show. But there is, as you said, Shekar, there are 4,000 jobs now. From what I understand from the transition team, they already have received 10,000 resumes. Should Indian Americans still apply, knowing that there are already so many candidates in the pipeline? What would your suggestion, advice be to a lot of young Indian Americans who are exceptionally talented?
So let me answer Robinder's question about what happens, because there is actually a fairly formal process. So you start with campaign. In the middle of the campaign, very quietly, you start transition. Assuming it were orderly, we would all be sitting around tables with the people on the other side and talking about how does transition work, what are the briefing books for the next secretary in each department. You would be setting up an office called the Presidential Personnel Office, PPO. Inside the White House, there is an office, and every department has a liaison from the White House appointed to work on presidential appointments. Okay, so these are called political appointments, which is basically an appointment that is political. You are temporary. You're only there at the pleasure of the president, and you leave when the president leaves, or you leave when the president tells you to leave. And you go into each department. So that office and its staffing is very critical, because if we have people from our community there, we make sure our names have a channel, have a channel system to go in. So that's how the transition on the appointment side moves into the administration. It formalizes. On the other side of it, on policy, many people go into the administration because they are there because they want to serve. One of the issues for Democrats, and it's a priority issue for me. So bluntly, This is something the AAPI Victory Fund, because we consist of a large number of very prominent Asian American businessmen across the country, business women, businessmen, and we have significantly always said, number one issue should be the economy, number one. I get the COVID, I get the pandemic, you have to solve it to move the economy, and therefore they're two sides of a coin, they're not one-sided. In order to move the economy right now, you need to deal with small business. So to us, the most important positions that Indian Americans can play, Asian Americans can play today, would be clearly in health, okay? 1 out of every 5 doctors is an Asian American. 1 out of every 12 nurses is an Asian American. So we have that expertise, that gravitas, Atul Gawande, Vivek Murthy, Kavita Patel. You can name the names and you will know them, you will see them on television. So that's not the issue. The issue to me is the economy. So I want to mention what Steve said.
Sorry.
Steve basically said,
Go ahead, Shekar.
Steve said we should be talking about innovation. Well, where are Indians prominent? They're prominent in business, in small business, in technology. So they should be applying, absolutely, because we need this president to be surrounded by people in all these departments and all these 4,000 jobs that are, younger and quite frankly smarter than I am on tech, but know that the economy is changing and we need to move resources into these areas. So that's why you have to keep applying. The fact that there are 10,000 doesn't mean 10,000 people want jobs. They are applying because it's open. You can apply. It's very cheap to apply, frankly. But the process of getting a job, giving up part of your life, committing to public service, making the commitment to do something for others rather than yourself requires commitment. Look at Arunan. He could make a lot more money in the private sector, but he's doing this because he actually believes this is important and necessary work. So I would urge all those who believe that concept of public service, which I think is in our blood, get out there and volunteer, but focus on innovation and the economy, because that's where the rubber will meet the road in terms of this government being successful.
Shekar, just Amit corrected me. It's 30,000 people. I don't know, maybe from the last time I heard the number, it's gone up to 30,000. So that's a pretty large number. But your message, Shekar, is apply and apply no matter what, because we have the talent and we have the passion for giving back. That's what you're kind of saying, Shekar, aren't you?
Yes, but you make a commitment. Don't just apply because you think it's a good idea. Because of that 30,000, 20,000 may not come to the government anyway. But apply because you are passionate about serving the country. Public service, number one. If that's what you are and you bring expertise, apply. Because then we can push you. The question, Sanjay, we ask, we had a process already at the AAPI Victory Fund. We set up a project called AAPI 46, assuming there would be a 46th president, which would be Joe Biden. We interviewed 389 people. But we only focused on the top 50 jobs. And the reason we only focused there is that if you and I and the rest of our community see our people sitting around that cabinet table, we will know that it's possible. It's possible in America to have Kamala Harris, who has Indian heritage. It is possible around that table and in the Supreme Court and in all the places of influence to have Indian Americans and Asian Americans, people who look like us. But the only way that happens is if we work at it and help those people get there. So first you tell me you're passionate about doing it, then I'm happy to help you do it. I'm not going to help you because you need a job. I'm sorry. That's not going into political appointments. It's not a job, it's a service. So if you start with that philosophy, I'm with you. Otherwise, frankly, go apply and go to a headhunter.
Well, so folks, you heard it. If you're passionate, Shekar is on your side. And if you're not, then go to a headhunter. Arunan, Shekar pointed about the sacrifices you've made and your family has made. There are those 4,000 very important jobs, but there are great people like you. What is your perspective? Is it possible from Connecticut for you to drive down to Washington, D.C. sometime in the future?
Yeah, I think anything's possible, but I'll put a little plug in for being involved at the local level too. I didn't set out to end up where I am now. I actually 2 years ago I ran for office here statewide in Connecticut, And along the way, I didn't win, but I met a lot of people along the way, got a lot of support from our community along the way that I really appreciate. And got to know the man who became our governor here, Ned Lamont in Connecticut, pretty well. And after that, I was ready to go back to law firm. I think my wife was ready for me to go back to law firm. And Ned asked me if I would come and serve in this capacity. And so it's been, far more fulfilling than anything I've done thus far. I wake up excited each morning, but also I see the impact of the work I do on a daily basis. And I think it's so important to have big faces and big names at the national level. I think it's also so important to be involved in your communities and to take ownership of our communities. And so, I'd like to see South Asians involved at all levels of government, and I'm so proud of the work that so many people on this panel are doing. That is going to impact our national scene. Looks like I'm proud of the work that's going on in North Carolina and Texas and Virginia and elsewhere here at the local level. I think it's just so important for us to feel like full owners in this society. In
Thanks,
which we live in.
Arunam. I'm going to try to get Satish in because he's either my eyes are going bad, but he comes in and out. So Satish, you've been obviously been very, very active. You started the organization, for Indian Americans for Biden-Harris, and this we've been discussing about transition and how there's a Shekar pointed out something very important, passion, but I think there's an excitement also in the community right now, because whether it's Kamala Harris or it's a transition from the Trump administration, a lot of people that I've talked to said, I want to do my part. I want to do my part. Satish, what is your thoughts in terms of transition and getting Indian Americans in there, people who are not an Indra Nooyi or Vivek Murthy, etc., but are in a law firm or running a tech company and have the background in AI or stuff like that? Thoughts on that, Satish? Did I lose him? Robinder, are my eyes playing mistake or did I lose him?
Well, he's playing hide and seek. He's gone in for a sabbatical to think over your question, Sanjay, which you asked. So I hope when he soon joins us, he'll come back with a thought.
I hope my question was.
Yeah.
Steve, Robinder, do you have a question?
Yeah. Sure. Maybe if I can follow up on the question that you have, and which I think several of our panelists have also mentioned, like the idea of passion, the idea of service, being involved in the local community, and that's where it comes. Fair enough. So again, I'll hark back to the question I asked initially about innovation, which I was actually referring more to in terms of administration or the transition team. What I meant then was, and now, let's say even now, we are looking at some marquee names from the Indian American community, like Vivek Murthy, XYZ, Amit Jani, Shekar, and all. Fair enough. My thing is that such folks, or whichever way, the next layer of the Vivek Murthys or the next Kamala Harrises and all. So what my thought is that, let's say in this process of transition, sure, there are 30,000 applications, of which some would be chosen or kept aside and all, and the transition team itself, right? So the question again is that after this whole process plays out, and thanks Shekar for sharing with our audiences, and folks, whosoever is listening to this program, please do put in your questions. We do see some questions coming in. You can ask about the mechanics, you can ask about the politics of transition and appointments, and I'm sure a wonderful panel out here would help you out or answer. So the point is that when so many people are getting involved in the transition process, right, not all would be, in the government political appointee or, on the policy side, either which way, right? So there'll be a good number of folks who come nearer the, the epicenter of the Oval Office or around. How can we innovate as the community, to keep this momentum going, keeping more people involved, so that and of course it's growing on its own organically. Lots of more, folks are getting involved much more now, right? So that's my essential one question again, that, facilitating, encouraging, and mentoring the next wave of the wider pyramid of the Indian American community.
Shekar?
Yeah, I just want to make 2 points. First of all, I have no desire for anything in the administration. I want to be very clear about that. No, I'm saying that for one reason. My only interest is in getting young people into public service. They can be in politics like Steve. They could run for office. They could be in the administration at a state or local level like Arunan. Doesn't matter. The point is, how do we get the folks who have this interest, this passion to make a difference, change the country, into the mainstream, so they have a chance at being a Vivek Murthy. Vivek didn't get there by himself. Okay, let's be blunt. Vivek got there because of his parents, his family, his community. But when he got to a place where he had worked for 6 years on the campaign with Obama, and he knew the president at that time then as somebody personally, then he was offered a job. But when he got that offered a job, Sanjay knows the story. It was very hard to get him confirmed to the United States Senate. Every one of us had to call everybody we knew to try to get him over the line. So Vivek hasn't forgotten who got him there and how he got there. And, जो कहते हैं, if good things happen to him, he will make sure good things happen in our community. This is what we want. So bottom line is, if you are young, if you are talented, you have passion, you want to be in public service, there's a whole bunch of ways you get into the system. Usually it is work for the campaign. Work for, and there were 5,000 volunteers that we could count just in the South Asian community who worked on this campaign. People like Arunan who already have day jobs, and we worked for this campaign. Steve worked for this campaign, and we have volunteers. So 5,000 people did. You know something? It made a difference. The turnout among Asian Americans in the state of Georgia alone was 91% more than in 2016. Almost double the number of voters. And by the way, the population grew 38%. So we found people who got engaged. Why? Because people picked up the phone, they texted. We did 6 Indian languages. So those people should want to now passionately go in and serve. So if they have a technology background, they have a background being an entrepreneur, running a venture capital fund, running a business, even a small business, being in the motel management business, whatever, they should be applying. We should be getting their names and saying to the people who become the secretaries and the assistant secretaries, here's a pipeline of people. Make them a special assistant, give them a responsibility. Next time around, you know what? That same person is going to aspire to that job 4 or 8 years from now. That's how you build a community. It doesn't happen by accident, just so we all get this clear. This happens because we all work together on it. We pull people up, we don't drag them down. That's really important.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to that, Shekar brought up a good point. I mean, in my opinion, as someone that's been in the game for over a decade, this isn't a spectator sport. You don't watch from the sidelines. You got to go all in. You can't put your toe half in the water. You can't go up like when I was a kid, you got scared going off the high dive. You either go and you jump or you don't. And if you're interested and you have passion, I think there's no question that our community has the talent. That's a no-brainer, whether it's small business, technology, innovation, healthcare. I think the key becomes mentoring that next generation. We're seeing this with young people running for office, but I think the executive positions are as important. Long-term policy, diplomacy, foreign affairs. I think the more I think about it is critically important. U.S.-India relationship, all the things going on around the world. And, the thing that concerns me the most is, and we're probably going to talk about it later, but I just hope that this President Trump finally just concedes and gives the transition process its full credit. Like someone just said in the question, the people are watching around the world about democracy. The General Services Administration is being held up on providing the key transition. And this pandemic is, at every minute that we talk, more and more people are dying from this pandemic. The vaccine will come. We know that. But I think it's critical that we get this process moving. So if you're out there in your community, let people know that even if they're Republican, they need to start standing up and, saying enough is enough. That's my biggest fear.
Thanks. Amit, question to you is that our community has generally been, we are successful because we are all pushing ourselves. As Shekar kind of hinted at something which I hope all of us got, that we pay it forward and we help each other. We talked about Vivek. Is there a process? Do you think because of Shekar talked about all these people, 5,000 people who actually contributed. Now is the time to mentor them, bring them along. And an organization like yours, I know it was more at the campaign level, but is there going to be an opportunity for us if we find the people that are there for us to do that? Or is your role going to kind of end at the political, now the election's over, your office, at least from that perspective, is over, but it's not going to carry forward into the transition, Amit?
Sure. Thanks for that, Sanjay. Yeah, no, absolutely. So what you're referring to, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, or APIs for short, APIs for Biden, this tomorrow is actually technically the last day of the campaign. So that'll, end. But what we are doing, like you mentioned, we had a monumental role, such a great and expansive infrastructure. We had over 14 ethnic groups, including South Asians for Biden. Within there, we had, a lot more, Indian Americans for Biden. We had Hindu Americans for Biden, Sikh Americans, Jains, et cetera, et cetera. We had state leadership councils in most of the key battleground states. We had over 100 active API and Indian, South Asian super volunteers. So, what usually happens every cycle,
computer, please?
You have
this
this
is
great,
not working.
So you have this great infrastructure, and often you lose that. So this time around, we're working very closely with the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, to make this more permanent and more formal. So right now we're working with the DNC API caucus chair to further formalize our infrastructure. So APIs for Biden is going to API Democrats generally. And we want to really make this permanent and continue working, not just for the presidential, but as others mentioned, Georgia is going to play a pivotal role, in January. That's really going to determine whether or not, the priorities of this administration, President-elect Biden, will be implemented with the 2 open Senate races there and the runoffs. And even moving forward, I mean, we have so many Indian Americans, South Asians running for office, and we want to support, our community and those candidates moving forward. So this won't end now. It won't end tomorrow just because the campaign's coming to an end. We are going to formalize that. For now, what I would recommend folks that are interested, go to apisforjoe.com. That's really we're going to transfer that over to API Democrats. But for now, apisforjoe.com. You can sign up there, and what we'll do is, as we move forward and formalize the process, for those that want to be involved and support and help, that would be a great way to do that. So again, that's
fantastic. I know you got to go, but that's very, very helpful, and I really wish you tremendous success in whatever you do, and congratulations. As I said, you've done an incredible job for the campaign, and really proud to see again a young person like you. And I hope whatever you do, we wish the best. So thanks so much for being with us and doing this. Now, Satish, I don't know if I'm going to be, if I ask a question, I'm afraid of asking you a question because you might just take off. But did you have any thoughts on the transition, Satish? Hello? Okay, I don't think...
He's on mute.
He's on mute.
Okay. I said my experience is limited in this field because I was appointed in 2005 on the state level by Governor Warner, and then 2 consecutive governors. So I had a fortune of serving 10 years. I think we have a great pool of talented people in our community, and we need to do that, level our expectations in a way that we are not going to get exactly the position we want, but we might get the second one. So we should be ready to serve, as Shekar said. It's a spirit of service. We may not get there today, but maybe a year or 2 will be there because these positions keep rotating also on the service. And there are about 9,000 positions open, and I think there are 4,000 appointed, like political appointees or others, and they are at all different levels, not only secretary, but cabinet, but also in a regular administrative level. And I believe the executive Review committees on each department are already active. The transition team is working behind the doors and for sensitivity reasons. And I think.
Hello. Okay. Well, Shekar, one of the questions that has come in, and Robinder, please jump in. Steve kind of alluded to this, is the current standoff that we see in terms of the transition. Do you think that is going to have an impact in the whole transition process? Is it going to delay things, etc.? That's something that a lot of our people who have applied want to know as to what will happen to the whole transition process and application because of the current standoff.
So does it affect things? Of course. You want the United States of America, a major power, a democracy, to have a natural and orderly transition. And the fact that it's not happening is a testimonial to a whole bunch of things, including a rather narcissistic leader who won't acknowledge he lost by 6 million votes. Anyway, so the bottom line is the appointments process will go forward. You will see appointments to the cabinet this weekend. You will see appointments next week. The process has moved forward. It will have to continue because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have to walk in and have a government to run. But what is going to be missing is, just as give you a very classic example, wouldn't it be great if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris could talk to Anthony Fauci right now and say, what do you think is going on behind the scenes, not on CNN or on television? What is actually going on? What do you believe should be done? What are the top 3 priorities? And bring their team together and say, let's go to work with this man and his apparatus, because at this point, he's the most credible face to this crisis. Instead, what they're doing is they're talking to each other and ex-officials, Rick Bright and other people like that. They're not able to talk to the source. So don't you think that anybody in their right mind at this point would want a normal transition to save American lives, to make sure that America remains secure and that we have the economy moving? So why is it that we aren't having instead a debate about what's the next stimulus look like? How do we get the economy moving so that we don't inherit even a bigger mess than we already have? So the answer is it affects things. But Sanjay, you know what? This country is a great country. The institutions are still holding against this barrage of anti-democratic, obstinate behavior. It's holding. And we should all be proud of that because we all came here and took a shot, right? I'm very proud of the fact that despite what's happened here in the last 4 years, this democracy is held. The judges are doing their job. The legislators are doing their job. I just wish there were people with more spine in the GOP. But that's the wishes, if beggars had wishes, they'd all be flying on horses, right? So it doesn't work that way exactly. I hope, only one last comment. I hope that through this, we've learned a very important lesson as Indian Americans, as immigrants, as young people who grew up in this country. Don't take democracy for granted. Don't assume that it works without you. So you can keep your head down, earn your living, and somebody else will bother to get involved and vote and participate, and everything will be fine. You cannot take it for granted. All I'm telling you is 80 million people who voted for Joe Biden did not take democracy for granted. And including in that is well over, 1 million plus Indian Americans who did not take democracy for granted. Don't ever do it again, because otherwise we could end up without democracy. That's the most important lesson learned from this election.
Thanks, Shekar. Don't take democracy for granted, and we are still a great nation that moves on. Arunam, you had some points on this topic of the transition and kind of where we are at right now.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to echo what Shekar had just said. One of our departments at Consumer Protection is the Drug Control Department for the state of Connecticut, and so we're working on standing up our vaccination distribution as these new vaccines come into the fore, and there's very promising signs from both from Pfizer, who has applied for emergency use authorization already, and from Moderna, and we, I think a lot earlier than we had initially thought. these could be out to market. But right now, the person who's going to be president, when you are getting those vaccines, is not able to talk to the healthcare professionals, as Shekar was saying, and not able to get a sense of what we've done so far, where the vaccine distribution channels are. I mean, if you are sick and tired of being stuck in your home, if you are terrified by this pandemic, if you're a Democrat or Republican, if you are ready to turn the page and move on, you should want this president to be able to hit the ground running. And it's just incredibly reckless. And I think, to Shekar's point, I think so often we treat politics like this sideshow that happens in Washington. And never has it been more apparent than right now in this election cycle that the decisions that are made and the things we watch on CNN impact our daily lives, impact whether people live and die, how long this pandemic drags on for, how able we are to recover from it. And as Americans, it's time to come together now. I mean, it's an election has happened. It's time to rally around our nation and support the president, the incoming president-elect, and move on as a nation and get past this terrible chapter. Everybody has hated 2020. Nobody's been a fan of this last year, and it's time to turn the page and move on. And I really am hopeful, much like Shekar, that we'll be able to do that.
Thanks. Great comments. It's time to move on, and things impact locally as to what happens in Washington. That's a wonderful point. Steve, there are people like you and others who are watching this and obviously want to contribute from a transition standpoint. You heard some of the things that Shekar and Amit and Arunan have pointed out as to what it will take to be part of the process. Shekar said service, passion, and being in this mix. Do you have any other points? I mean, we are obviously hoping that someone like you also can be in Washington. Being in Washington is not obviously everything that is there, but talent is also needed of people like you, Steve. Steve, you're on mute.
Well, I think for the people listening across North Carolina, I think Shekar has made some great points along with Amit about this, just the process in general. And I think that go make your application, but then don't stop at that. Keep applying if you're interested. And I think I'd love to come to Washington one day. Like my late father-in-law reminded me shortly before he passed away, he was an immigrant who went on to retire with his wife as a U.S. Air Force colonel, immigrants from Gujarat. He said all that matters in life is that you put yourself in a position where you can help as many people as often as you can. And I think that that's what I would encourage people to do. That's how I live my life every day, just trying to make, even at the local level, as much impact as I can. And what I find is when you do that, you'll automatically see yourself moving into roles where you can make a difference. And so I think there's just tremendous opportunities for our community to, yes, not take democracy for granted and to bring their experience, whether it's in small business, technology, healthcare, helping this administration deal with the pandemic, build our economy back, and bring our country together so that we can set an example to the rest of the world. The other thing we didn't talk about is immigration. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting policy positions working with Jake Sullivan and his team just in immigration policy. I'm hearing nightmare stories here in North Carolina. H4 spouses paying twice the tuition in North Carolina from in-state. H-1Bs feeling like they've been, living in fear if their paper isn't processed. Families being separated. And we have over 40,000 in North Carolina, skilled immigrants producing our economy. So I'm hoping that this administration can work with the U.S. Congress to eventually have an immigration policy that is streamlined. But there's a lot of immigrants. I mean, immigration has become a dirty word under this president. And everyone here is pretty much an immigrant or the son of immigrants like me. But I think, I think it's time for our community to continue this remarkable transformation. And now is the time to step up. So I would just encourage people to listen to this. I'm going to put it in a link and forward it on to all of my people here in North Carolina. And I'm continuing to work with Sanjay and everybody here in a successful transition process. And I'm so glad to be calling Joe Biden on January 20th, President Biden. That's going to be a happy day for me.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it. Robinder, do you want to kind of round it out? We are at the end of the hour. I know we've not had a chance with Satish, but we'll probably have to have him on our next show. Satish wants to.
I'll just make a quick comment.
Sure.
I'm sorry about my disconnect, but
No problem.
Georgia is on my mind right now. If we don't win Georgia both, we'll have a president with one hand tied behind for 4 years. And we really all have to work to Georgia, make sure we get the both Senate seats in the runoff. And also, we have to lower down our expectations. If we don't get in there the year one appointment, we can get the next year. We can get 2 years from now. So we just have to go with the spirit of service, as Shekar has mentioned, and I think we'll all be happy. Thank you.
Thanks, Satish. Georgia is on his mind, and it's also on the minds of Arunan. And as he said, if we don't get in the first year, it will be second year or the third year. I think those are great points. Robinder, do you want to close us out, please?
Sure, sir. Thank you. I mean, the closing and, the wrapper, Sanjay, is yours and your honor, please. But I'll just make a couple of points. One, I think, I was struck by what Steve was saying. I do understand and agree the point about immigration and all. You see, there will be some changes to immigration, for example, which may not be as per the expectations. So we have to manage, or we have to have expectations which are balanced out there, right? It's not that with the Biden administration, I think, all dreams and aspirations on H1 or immigration would be sorted out because it's such a complex process. That's one. Secondly, I would say also, and there was a question from, I think, one of our viewers, Vikram Chauhan. Viewers, please keep on putting your questions. We love to get your questions so that our panel, we can pick their minds and brains, and Sanjay can, extract from them some fine insights to your questions. But the question of Vic, which was there, I saw, he was mentioning about transition team and saying that, controlling, if not the message, or being out there in terms of the messaging from the transition team, so that things do seem, quote unquote, in if not in control, but in a certain direction. The other aspect to this, which I wanted to just share quickly with respect to India also, for example, you see, we all understand what's happening in the United States. Folks within the US, we are heading into a healing process, and, give take some. What is really happened is that the US has lost a lot of moral authority across the world. One. Second, and it holds especially within India also, right? Now, what I want to point out is that can our Indian American community play, not can, it would of course be playing, and Sanjay, leaders like you and Steve and Arunam and Satish and Shekar and Amit, that, kind of conveying the right messaging about America. America is not totally gone to the, gone to the boondocks, let's say, right? Which is a impression which is gathering in the world. America, no nation is perfect, right? We all have imperfections, but we are working towards perfection. And America is the leader in that, man. So if America loses that moral authority, it's not only that it's a loss to the world, it's a loss to America itself. Because tomorrow, when negotiations are happening with respect to foreign policy, with the US, with NATO, with Asia Pacific, with China, even with India, you see, the terms of those negotiations will be very different unless somehow this message is corrected. And I would think, and I hope, and of course, knowing the Indian American community, how we often and widely engage with the Indian government and the people in India and Indian public opinion, that we will be able to bring a balance to this view that, no, guys, it's not that this was an aberration, let's say, right? Or whatever happened. America is not, has not gone bust. America has, leadership, thought leadership, because that's good for America itself and for India also. If we lose that perspective in India, then India would be looking at, it's like that you lose respect for someone and then you negotiate very differently and you end up messing yourself also. So that would apply not only for India-US relations, I would say that apply for all across US relations and foreign affairs. So that's a small distinction. Sanjay, over to you, sir, for your
thank you, Robinder.
And
yeah, and your point is on foreign policy. My hope is that President-elect Biden is going to really create a robust State Department. The State Department that existed under Trump, the foreign policy really was a Trump foreign policy. The State Department had really very little role. I think you're going to see some changes in, depends on who's heading up, be the Secretary of State, but you can see a more robust and active State Department. You're going to see more stronger ties with NATO countries and traditional allies, and that's the expectation. Time will definitely tell, and you're going to see, as Amit, Shekar, and others have pointed out, Indian Americans, Asian Americans in those agencies that'll give some unique perspective. So I think the message that you heard from our amazing panelists is passion, service, apply. You have now the websites that have been given by Amit. 30,000 people have applied, but you got to apply because Satish pointed out it might not be year one. More positions open up in year 2 and 3. And Arunan pointed out that there are state, local opportunities because those are also very important. And I think you see someone like him doing an incredible job. So really thank you all for an incredible panel. You see what Steve's done out there. And thank you, Arnam, for what you're doing. And Satish, for unfortunately, we didn't have you consistently, but maybe in the next show. And Steve, for what you're doing. Amit has done an incredible job with the API and Biden-Harris and Shekar. So I really think it was a great panel, and our viewers are going to be following up with all of you on that. So have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, everybody. Keep up the great work.
You bet.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
It's great to be a part.
Thank you.